Is Jeffrey Epstein still alive? Well, let's uncover the specific evidence we have, and then we can make inferences. We'll keep the speculation to a limited amount. We do have imagery that is surfacing. Some is fabricated, some is older imagery, and some is imagery that we don't know if it's actually Jeffrey Epstein in Tel Aviv, Israel. So we'll put aside the old imagery that is circulating around from interviews or pre-2020, pre-2019. We'll remove the fabricated images, the artificial intelligence doctored imagery. And then we have a couple of images that have since surfaced, and we've been able to take this imagery and put it into reverse AI functions to determine if artificial intelligence can determine if it is artificially intelligent created. And the vast consensus or conclusion by AI itself using different functions is that the imagery that we're looking at as potentially legitimate has not been doctored and or created by AI. And it's looking at a host of different details and features of the imagery, reflections, etc. And it's basically Jeffrey Epstein with a large beard and long hair. And then, of course, you can reverse engineer it using, again, AI functions, AI tools, and you can create a Jeffrey Epstein or similar imagery out of that as if he had shorter hair and no beard. So those images are circulating. Now, we're going to corroborate evidence because this is how you get to the truth of an investigation. This is how you actually conduct an investigation. You're corroborating information. You're not just taking one piece of evidence and now that's coming to a sound conclusion. You have a hypothesis. You now need to test the hypothesis to create a theory. And a theory is sound, meaning you're testing an experiment and you're receiving the same conclusion. This is a little bit different in political science or any other type of soft science versus a hard science, but the concept is still similar. Now, we have also, actually, there are a lot of internet sleuths that are online, and they've been able to see the Fortnite account that was linked to Jeffrey Epstein, and it was Little St. James 1. That was the name of this gamer tag. He purchased, I think it's called the VR Bucks. I've never played Fortnite, but VR Bucks in-game. And I believe that last purchase was between 2023 to 2024. So this is 3 to 4 years after the alleged suicide of Jeffrey Epstein. So that is bizarre. Now, the location specifies Israel. You also have a vast amount of people who have since, so the DOJ released all these files. I suppose they incidentally put in the login information to Jeffrey Epstein's Outlook email account, and people were able to get into that. So I don't know if they've completely obscured information and have tainted, let's say, the crime scene, the intangible digital crime scene, but hopefully we get something out of that. Let me also read some more evidence that we have. So let me go back to the imagery we have. So for the imagery that is coming out of Israel, allegedly, we have a similar tattoo structure on his arm. I believe it's his right arm, actually. And now maybe he's going to work on lasering that off just to cover his identity even further. Within the Epstein files, you had this weird room on Epstein Island, Little St. James, and this room had almost like a dentist chair with weird masks in the room. And a lot of people were coming to the inference that this was used to create new identities. Now, it could be that, or it could be something else, but it was definitely something of a medical room. It could be something as simple as like a spa, like a medical spa. So they are performing type of procedures on you, but for the purpose of surface level intervention, not necessarily changing your entire face. But we don't know the answer to that, right? This is just more evidence that we're pushing out there. You have the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have a memo. This is, again, in the Epstein file, so this is directly coming from the Justice Department. They showed that Epstein died on August 9th, even though it wasn't reported until August 10th. Now, you could say, well, it's just the discrepancy in time, and they reported it much later, but they're reporting that the official death was on August 10th, not August 9th. But the internal memorandum shows August 9th. You also have information, again, as per the files, the documents that we're seeing, where the FBI, they went into the jails, or in this case, the special housing unit that Epstein was in. They confiscated the hard drive. So this would have the footage that would show different angles of maybe Epstein being rolled out if he were to be rolled out. So that's evidence tampering and or evidence destruction. That's a serious felony, right? There are a lot of crimes that are being committed by our own government here. Then you have separate documentation that is corroborating a witness who saw Epstein being wheelchaired out of the prison a day before it was announced that he took his own life. And in these documents that we see, there was a decoy that was, let's say, shown to the press, and then Epstein was taken in a separate way out of the jail to obscure from the press, from media attention. So basically what we have is foreknowledge that Epstein was going to allegedly pass away the very next day. And the day before, he was removed from the prison, and a witness saw him, and the FBI is admitting it. And then, of course, you have imagery coming to us from Israel, along with his gamer tag that he played on, as active as 2023 to 2024. And we have the purchases, in-game purchases, to confirm that. There were also certain in-game achievements that were unlocked pertaining to Fortnite. Again, I have never played Fortnite. I should have asked my brother, actually. I think he played Fortnite back in the day. And those achievements, you can see, were unlocked 2023 to 2024. The noose that Epstein had allegedly used is nowhere to be found. We don't know where the noose is. So we actually don't know how Epstein took his own life. With the medical examination report, we have strong signs of strangulation, not consistent of your taking your own life with a noose, essentially. Now, you do have Mark Epstein. Mark Epstein is Jeffrey Epstein's brother. He's still alive, to my knowledge. And he identified the body of Jeffrey Epstein. But that doesn't take into account that Mark Epstein could have been compromised and or coerced, or just in fear for his life, which I guess is a type of coercion. And he may not have noticed subtle details when there was the body and he was identifying the body. So for example, now we have imagery of Jeffrey Epstein when he was alive, obviously, and you see his nose and it's almost in a straight fashion, a perfect triangular fashion. When you see the nose of the body of the alleged Epstein that took his own life, it's a curved nose. Now you could say, well, after you pass, your body does change a little bit. Naturally, you have fermentation of bacteria, gases that are coming out. Your skin can change a little bit, but that's still an item to note that the nose is of a different structure. Now, this also kind of reminds me of how within the Epstein files, they talked about, or they referred to Biden as being a double for the actual Biden who passed away in 2019. So the Biden that they held for the presidency was a different Biden, according to the files, than the Biden that we all knew as a vice president under Barack Obama. And I don't recall what he may have passed away from. Perhaps it was a stroke or something of that nature. In fact, Biden did have a stroke, I believe, and he received medical attention for that. Now, there is information or evidence to corroborate this, what was in the files about Biden, which is that, I'll tell a story. So George Bush Sr. obviously was a president of the United States. He was a CIA director before that. There was speculation that he was in CIA even before CIA director, but there's no substantial evidence to prove that. However, when he was a president, his CIA director came in wearing a CIA mask. And I want everyone to pull up the imagery later on, but George Bush Sr., who was once CIA, keep that in mind, had no clue that that was his CIA director. He just thought it was another aide. And his CIA director took off the mask. So it was a woman. And even the disguise was also a female, but these were two drastically different people. Now, when you look up the images, they are somewhat blurry. Keep in mind, this was taken back, I want to say the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And so, yeah, that was a few decades ago. But you can tell, you can see how easily you could have been fooled by wearing that CIA mask. You take it off. Okay, this is actually who you are. And Senior was surprised at that. And so now we fast forward in time back to 2020 to 2024. Think about how much better the technology has come to in terms of adaptive face technology. You have to think about all the technology that we have commercially, which is already extremely amazing. I mean, even for CGI or movies, etc., they already have fantastic technology. I recently saw something with Harry Potter, where I'm presuming most people here have seen Harry Potter, where they had the Griffin, and I want to say it was the Prisoner of Azkaban, where they had the Griffin. They had the Griffin in other movies, I believe, but the Prisoner of Azkaban was when they introduced the Griffin. I think it was the third and the fourth movie, Goblet of Fire. So the Griffin was actually an animatronic, and they did use an animatronic, but they also coincided it with computer generated imagery to create what looked very realistic to the audience. Now, of course, I'm not necessarily saying that there was CGI applied to a Biden, although you and I are never going to be able to prove that because we're watching him on TV. We're not there in person. But there were many instances where Biden was 4 to 6 inches taller or significantly, substantially taller than what an actual Biden was, which would be around a 6 foot, 6'1". So now we're going to 6'4" to 6'7", something like that. There was an instance of that. There have been 2 to 3 times that I have personally seen with video evidence where you have, let's say, these skin hooks, which help you take the mask on and off, and you can integrate it very well, even under the chin. They have that. You also have the earlobes. The earlobes are different. You have the facial structure is vastly different, right? So these are just examples. This is not definitive proof. This is evidence, right? All this is evidence. So if you can connect the dots well enough, then you can paint a picture. But this is an example of what could have occurred with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the state of Israel, why would they harbor a Jeffrey Epstein? Well, we know that Epstein now, through an unclassified document, was tied to Mossad via Alan Dershowitz, who is a lawyer to Mossad and to Jeffrey Epstein, and to Ehud Barak, who is a former prime minister of Israel. So we know that this was an intelligence operation. We also know that the state of Israel notoriously saves those people who are being criminally prosecuted or potentially criminally prosecuted, who are going to over time be criminally prosecuted in other countries, and they allow them to come back to their country with no extradition back to the country where there was a crime that was committed. Okay, even if it's alleged. So, for example, I want to say a few months ago, there was an individual, there were Americans, but also an Israeli individual, and he was tied to the cybersecurity efforts at the very top of Israel cabinet. And he was caught in a sting operation pursuing an underage individual, along with other Americans. Now, the other Americans were imprisoned. This individual got to fly back to Israel, where he is kept safe. So Israel is notorious for bringing back their own and preventing extradition. They see their land as a way where if you're being persecuted or prosecuted, you can come back to Israel and you will be safe. Now, obviously, Israel has their own internal strife, and they do prosecute their own and persecute their own, but that's a different situation. So in this case, it makes sense. Jeffrey Epstein could be back in Israel where he is well protected. And I remember even a few years ago, and this is just anecdotal, so this is not evidence tied to the files. Now, I'm sure you could further investigate this, but Epstein was seen in the Mediterranean on a yacht. Obviously, that's right there next to Israel. So we do have all this information, and for a lot of people, we don't know what to think. We don't know what to think because would our own intelligence know if he were alive? Most likely. On paper, we work with Israel. We share intelligence. Now, even though we share the majority of our intelligence with Israel, Israel still participates in bugging our own CIA when they come to America. I mean, there are these stories of Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with Boris Johnson, the prior prime minister of the United Kingdom, and he asked to use Boris Johnson's private restroom in his private office. Netanyahu went in. Boris Johnson later found this later. There was a bug there, right? When Mossad visits CIA here in the States, they no longer go to CIA headquarters for the vast majority of their meetings. They meet offsite. And that's because Mossad has tried to bug CIA headquarters every single time. They'll bring these gifts or these items, and CIA will find they're all bugged, audio devices, etc. So we have a real problem here when you have a country that is trying to gain, even though we already share intelligence, they're trying to gain even more leverage without our consent. And honestly, it's a violation of law. It's a violation of diplomatic efforts, but we don't do anything as a country. So our intelligence most likely knows what really occurred to Epstein. And it's just, we want answers. Like all the people want, all the public wants is answers. And it's so difficult to get answers. It's like pulling teeth out Now, in many cases, we can pull the teeth and get some teeth. Like we got 3 million files. Granted, a lot of them are redacted. But when it comes to pulling other teeth out, it just seems we can't get a grip. And that's because, well, you have the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, which is a foreign lobbyist group, and they fund over 85%, 90% of our Congress. And so you have a huge chunk of our Congress, Democrat and Republican, that will always be in favor of bills that support Israel, even if it means undermining the First Amendment. So, as an example, there are anti-Semitism laws that are always trying to be passed. I mean, we have BDS laws that already exist in something like 30 plus states in the union. So BDS laws are boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Okay. So you can't, if you want to do any type of work with the state, these are individual states, you cannot boycott, divest, or sanction Israel. Now, what other country does that apply to? No other country. It only applies to Israel. And it's so broad, it's so vague that the state can come in, depending on who's in charge, and they can say, well, you said something negative about Israel. That's anti-Semitic. So that's a type of boycott. That's a type of sanctioning, right? So now we're not going to do work with you. Now, that infringes on the First Amendment. You can say that they're a state, so they have, as per the 10th Amendment, the state's rights. But Supremacy Clause demands that you have to follow federal law. And all the federal laws have to fit within the parameters of the top of the hierarchy, which is the original 10 Bill of Rights. Now, we have other amendments now, but the original 10 Bill of Rights, you cannot infringe of that. States' rights, states' laws can't infringe on our most absolute of constitutional rights. And even our Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she was the governor of South Dakota, I want to say South Dakota, and she was trying to pass anti-Semitism laws in her state. Now, the First Amendment allows you to say items that are offensive, that are derogatory, whether people agree with it or not. It allows you to criticize religions, to criticize governments, to criticize your own country. We can criticize and burn our U.S. flag, even though I don't necessarily agree with that. So why can't we do that with a foreign country? Now, there are other foreign lobbyist groups, and they do give money to our politicians, but they're all registered under FARA. FARA is the Foreign Agents Registration Act. This ties to the Foreign Assistance Act. If you are going to receive well, it doesn't necessarily tie to the Foreign Assistance Act, but that is separate. So I'll break it down. So FARA, if you're going to be a foreign lobbyist group, you have to be registered as a foreign agent. When you're registered as a foreign agent, it doesn't bar you from any political contributions. It just ensures that there's transparency. So now we can track all the transactions. Now, to a degree, if you're influencing domestic politics, I'm going to say that's unconstitutional. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. Now, separate to that, with the Foreign Assistance Act, tied to the Foreign Assistance Act is NPT and FARA. So you have to be part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and you have to be a foreign agent that's registered. If you are doing any type of lobbying, I mean that's already a default. So Israel is not part of NPT. In fact, they have a nuclear policy that is ambiguous in nature. Because, they cultivated uranium from our NUMEC site, which is the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Company. This is in Pennsylvania, or was in Pennsylvania. They brought it to the Negev Desert, and they built the Nimona nuclear reactor. And there was a feud between Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion and President John F. Kennedy at the time. That came out in the JFK files, which, by the way, our DOJ is supposed to go in and read all this and disseminate it in an organized fashion for us, and then go after individuals with prosecutory action, but they don't do any of that. We have to do all the work. And again, it's like they don't want to release this information because it's incriminating to them. It's incriminating to the institutions. It's incriminating to people who they ideologically support, even though it's un-American, right? So this is a serious problem that we have. Now, what do we want to see happen? Do we want to see if Jeffrey Epstein is alive? Should there be an investigation into that? Yes. Why, as a DOJ, are you letting, and I suppose you have to let them, that's part of free expression. But why are you letting individuals who, I mean, this ranges, right? This is a meritocracy, so I'm actually glad that this is occurring, where you have people who are attorneys, people who are, let's say, medical doctors or physicians, people who are investigative journalists, people who are part of law enforcement, and maybe they're doing this off duty, and people who are just at home, who like following the news, who are eating Cheetos, who watch a lot of TV or anime. You have a wide range of people who can access these files and run investigative efforts. But the DOJ should be at the forefront of these efforts. You should be investigating, is Jeffrey Epstein alive? Then do a press conference on it. And don't circumvent with I mean, they're never going to do that. But if you were to do that, still don't circumvent, still don't talk in circles or filibuster, but actually be direct with us. This is what we found. This is what we haven't found. Now, they're not going to do that because there's a conflict of interest, which is a huge issue. But the DOJ, our Justice Department, should be running that investigation. Every single item here that is, there are certain trending items that have popped up with the Epstein files. Jerky. Is that tied to human meat? Jeffrey Epstein, is he alive? Look at all these items. We see pictures of him. Same facial structure, same type of hair if you actually create the proportions of it. Same tattoo, gamer tag. All these trending items, the DOJ should go in. They should have a dedicated team that investigates each and one of these items. And we don't want to hear a bunch of smoke. We want to know what the truth is. And what are you going to do about it? But we don't have any of that. So because we don't have any of that, even if it's not true, we still want you to investigate it. Because at the very least, you're canceling out any possibility that it's true. These are items that are tied to public interest. And for you not to fulfill the answers or solutions of the public interest, you are derelict in duty. You are not fulfilling your duty, oath, obligation, and service to the American people and the United States Constitution. And look, Jeffrey Epstein is just one person. So even if he is alive, well, there are tens, if not hundreds of people who are directly tied to this ring. And make no mistake, even if Jeffrey Epstein is no longer active, even if he's no longer alive, whatever has happened to him has happened to him. Even if he's not in the picture anymore, do we really believe that these sick individuals and these trafficking rings and whatever else they were into, these ritualistic ideals that they had, maybe satanic to a degree, which there are people who genuinely are in favor of that. Do we believe that that doesn't exist? It just went away with Epstein? Of course not. This has always existed in history. Different civilizations, different religions, whether you believe in them or not, but they have existed. And there are people like that. It's a subset of the population. It's not a large amount of the population, but it's concerning when that subset controls a lot of our institutions, of our governing structure, of our fiscal policy, of our U.S. foreign policy, of our domestic policy. This is a serious issue, and it doesn't look like any part of our government is doing anything about it. In fact, Kash Patel, FBI director, granted, you have a bureaucracy underneath you, so they're going to suppress information from you, and they're going to act as a blockade because they're the bureaucracy that's in there for decades. You're only in there for a 4-year term if you can serve the entire term. So Kash Patel, he stated when he was testifying to Congress, if he saw any credible evidence of sex trafficking with Epstein, clientele, etc., he would have pursued it with prosecutory action. I suppose it's more law enforcement action. You would do a criminal referral or act under the Office of the Attorney General. But now we have all the evidence and we're seeing it. So you saw it before us. You saw it before us where there's talk about torture and sexually assaulting little girls and little boys and all these code words, which are clearly code words. Any cryptographer or psychologist, any decipher can look through that and translate that into code words. I mean, at the very least, investigate it, right? We want to see an investigation at the bare minimum. We don't even get that. So this is why people are upset. And this is why we have to go through the entire files and put out discourse and cover what's in the files, infer what we can. Sure, there's going to be some speculation, but we're going to cover the evidence for the vast majority of this. And then people, they're going to run their own due diligence, and then they're going to come to their own conclusion. And maybe you have people in the government, whether it's domestic or foreign, and they believe, well, no matter what people pursue, even if they do get close to the truth, they're not going to do a damn thing about it because we control all the institutions. We control their money. We control their governing structure. We control the courts. We control everything. We control their legislature. So perhaps that's true. But when it comes to a certain point, you don't want to get to a point. This is more of a PSA to the elites out there, if they're even watching. And I'm not advocating for this, but this is what civilizations have done when there's a breaking point, when there's a threshold that has been broken. You have to maintain a certain threshold. This is why we have the whole the term that was coined back in the Roman Empire, breads and circuses, which still exists to this day. I mean, the NFL is an example of this. NFL, by the way, the playing time for the average NFL game is like 15 minutes. So you're watching 2-3 hours of a game where only 15 minutes is active play time. And you're being distracted by lights and food, bad food. Like the food in America is terrible for you, especially the grains, the bread. But you're sitting there for 4 or 5 hours watching a game. And Sure, it's entertaining, but you're not getting anything out of it. It's a type of bread in circuses. It's another gladiator game. Now, that's not to say you can't tune into a gladiator game from time to time, but there are people who literally eat, live, and breathe this, and they're even doing fantasy football, right? Or they're betting on games, etc. Unless this is your primary way of making income, which to gamble is not really a sound way of making primary income. But there are people who will go to work, they'll come home, they'll just watch games, they'll do fantasy football. Imagine if you put that amount of time in something more creative, more productive, or maybe just making society better in general. Maybe after going after these nefarious actors who are compromising our systems and our infrastructure. We are the most prosperous country in history. Yet we spend all this money on military. Our infrastructure here domestically is shit. You look at China, for everything that you want to criticize China of, their infrastructure. Now, I'm still going to criticize their engineering because they don't build their infrastructure to a design that I personally prefer, such as like in the UAE or Dubai. The infrastructure that they build in Dubai is safe. Okay, first and foremost, the engineering that they do is safe. But even if you let's look at it, let's look at a Dubai, let's look at a China. The engineering, the infrastructure that they're building, you have to give it to them. They have clean roads, no potholes. I mean, in the major areas, they're building massive structures. They're accommodating their people. What are we doing here in America? Now, this is more of a local issue when you have potholes on the street. Your property tax is supposed to pay for that, or your municipal tax. But why are these items not being fixed? Because we're too focused on other items that have nothing to do with us. We're too focused on destabilizing different parts of the world. I just saw this recently. The first cargo ship from Venezuela of oil has been sent to Israel. It's the first time in years that Israel has received Venezuelan oil. So that's what taking over Venezuela was all about. It was all about making sure that Israel could be a little bit more independent. They didn't have to be as dependent on oil from other countries. And because America now controls, by proxy, Venezuela, Israel doesn't have to worry. And that is a type of fuel that they can utilize to go against these Arab nations to be the hegemony in the Middle East. So everything is adding up and more people are saying this. And I don't know how you can go on, I suppose TikTok is censorious now. I don't know how you can go on YouTube, on Instagram, on X. X is probably the most based out of all of them. And I suppose it's all algorithmic. So based on what you're already consuming, that's what you'll receive more of. So I guess people could go onto Instagram Reels and not see anything pertinent from a political point of view. Although once you get into that algorithm, it's very hard to stray away from it. But I don't know how you can see, or you can't see, how everything is coming together. We've been lied to about everything. Jeffrey Epstein won the Powerball under Zorro Trust. People are saying he won it twice. Under my research, I saw that he won it once, but you won I think it was around $80 million. He took the cash option right at the bottom of the market, most likely invested that capital. The market went back up, probably made hundreds of millions of dollars just from that. I don't know how people, I don't want to say we should be nihilistic. We should be realistic, not even optimistic. We should be realistic, but we know that life could be better. So there is hope because life could be improved. And that just means we need to go after these nefarious actors from a lawful point of view. But they need to realize when you break that threshold and you have tens of millions of people who are against you, you can't turn away from that. They're hoping that they can live the rest of their lives without any interference, without any type of criminal prosecution, without any type of obstruction that comes their way. They're hoping that they can suppress information or suppress the populace enough to where they can live out their days in luxury, maybe still commit the same type of crimes just with a different ring and keep it hush-hush. They're hoping that people are not going to be mad about this. They're hoping that people are going to be too overburdened. They can barely keep up with their finances. Wages are stagnant. There's little job opportunity. They're hoping that they distract us well enough and they malnourish us to a point where we can't properly think. We have low testosterone. We can't cognitively think to ourselves to come up to certain conclusions about how these people are trying to screw us over every single day and how they actively, physically and literally screw us over. And they're never held accountable. They're never held accountable. And then the people who we believe in, who we put into office, who are saying the right things, for the most part, well, they screw us over too, metaphorically. They get into office and they just become part of the establishment, part of the blob. And what recourse do we have? You would think if there are 340 plus million people in this country, and you have people who are governing us or who are tied to uh, domestic policy, foreign policy, any type of law enforcement or adjudication. There's thousands of those people. Well, there are tens of millions of us and thousands of them. So is it really that we can't create coalitions and work together to try to install the right people? Are these people truly smarter than the vast majority of us and they're able to manipulate us at this level and get away with it? I mean, maybe partially, but at a certain point, the dam is going to break.